Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special virtual wine tasting with the incomparable Rick Steves. Today, we are joined by dozens of fabulous public media stations across the country. We cannot thank you enough for being here with us and for your support. Your ticket purchase supports your station and is helping keep public media funded. In a minute, we'll be joined by Rick Steves, who will be tasting along with us as we learn about our 6 delicious Italian wines. I hope everyone has their kit with them and is ready to taste. If you haven't already done so, make sure to take the corks off of all 6 wines so we can get them ready to pour and so you can let them breathe. My name is Colton and I am your sommelier for this evening. I have the great privilege of being here to present for you on behalf of In Good Taste Wines, the winery and procurer of these adorable mini bottles that you have in front of you. We will be tasting 6 Italian wines this evening, predominantly from the Mediterranean island of Sicily. As we talk through the common wines of these grapes from Italy, the climates in which we find these grapes, and the soil that makes these Italian wines so great, we will also be weaving in plenty of time to talk with Rick about his stories from not only Sicily, but all other parts of Europe and the rest of the world. For tonight's tasting, we will be using the following order. First and foremost, we will be going through first our La Pluma Fiano. Next will be our Andiamo Grecanico, will be the next one. Our third will be our Balance of Powers, Rosato d'Italia. Next, after that, when we get into the reds, will be Nerello Cappuccio, will be the first of our reds. After that, we will have our Balance of Powers, Rosso d'Italia. And last but not least, we will end with our Fortune Favors, Nerello Mascalese, will be the last one. And as Rick and I go through each of these wines, I will share each bottle with you up to the camera like I was just showing. So worry not about remembering that specific order. We will also be putting the name of each wine we are currently tasting in the chat so that you can follow along. Now, before we get officially started here, I did want to explain a few things about how this evening event will work, especially considering that we are using Zoom webinar. In this setup, we cannot see or hear you, but we do still want to hear from you. You can ask questions during the course of the conversation by opening the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and typing in your question. You can enter your questions in at any point in time during our conversation. We will be monitoring the questions, whether it be a question for Rick about his travels and the different wines he has tasted through his journey, or if it's about the wines that we are tasting this evening. See a question that you also want to hear the answer to? Make sure to jump in the chat and use the voting feature to click the thumbs up on that specific question in the Q&A tab. The most popular questions will rise to the top of the list. We know that there will be lots of questions this evening for how many of you are on this call tonight, so we will focus on the questions that have the most votes that most of you are wanting to hear. We are also offering captions for our friends through our friends at Partners Interpreting. To activate Zoom's automated captioning feature, select the closed captioning button at the bottom of your screen. From there, select the live transcript option. 2 transcription display options will pop up. We recommend that you select subtitles to enable captioning at the bottom of your screen. You can also select full transcript as the other option. A sidebar window opens where you can see what each speaker is saying. Please bear in mind that closed captioning might be slightly delayed. And now to introduce you to the one that you have all been waiting for. He is America's most respected authority on European travel, empowering Americans to have European trips that are fun, affordable, and culturally broadening. He is the founder and owner of Rick Steves Europe, a travel business with a tour program that brings more than 30,000 people to Europe annually. And if he wasn't busy enough, he's also a popular public television host, a best-selling guidebook author, as well as an outspoken activist. Rick is a public media star and beloved across the world, and I don't think I really need to even give that introduction to the 5,000 people that are on tonight's call. So without further ado, welcome, Rick, and cheers. So great to have you with us tonight.
Colton, great to be with you and great to be with so many people that understand that public broadcasting is worth supporting. And if you can drink a little good wine at the same time, why not?
Absolutely, 100%. And on that note of drinking good wine, Rick, let's get our first wine going. That is going to be our La Pluma Fiano, is going to be the first wine that we're working with here. So everyone get a little bit into your glass here. Be ready to just raise a quick little toast. Again, this is our La Pluma Fiano, is the first one we're working with here. That is our first wine of the evening. We thought it'd be a little bit torturous to have you just have to sit here and wait for us to talk first before we actually poured some of the wine on this one. So cheers to you, Rick. Cheers to everyone that is joining us, and for a fabulous evening of wine tasting. So
And
cheers to us.
salute.
Salute, exactly. Utterly fabulous. And we'll get a little bit more into the wine in a few seconds. But you know what, Rick, just general impression out the gate. Is this exciting you? Is this getting you ready? How are you feeling about this wine?
This wine. I'm feeling good about it. You know, when I think of Sicily, I think of red wine, and this is a white wine. Is this a Sicilian wine, Colton?
This is a Sicilian wine. In fact, it
Yeah.
is. So this is Fiano, which is a grape that
And
originally came from northern Italy, but just trounced its way down, got to the world of Sicily as well. I do have to say, Rick, I just did see in the chat that someone says, "Hi, Rick. I want to grow up to be just like you one day." So I love that.
oh, be careful what you wish for.
And I was about to say, Rick, you're such a child at heart. I don't think you've actually grown up quite yet. You're still enjoying your youth.
Well, it's my tours, when I take groups around Europe, they've taught me it's never too late to have a happy childhood, and age only matters if you're a cheese. Those are two phrases to live by, and good examples of how I learn from my travelers, just like my travelers hopefully learn from me.
You know what? I feel like there's a great branding opportunity with that one, Rick, of age only matters if you're a cheese. I absolutely love that. Well, just
Wow.
to quickly talk about this lovely wine that is in your glass. So this is the grape of Fiano. This is a grape that I think a lot of people have never heard of before, especially when we compare it to the traditional French varietals. They're not as, familiar with this grape, but there is a possibility, hotly debated, but it could be a grape that has a longer wine producing history than even the Pinot Noirs of Burgundy, interestingly enough. So it traces back to many empires of the past, is what we like
Wow.
to say here with this one. Now, what is it similar to for those of you that aren't familiar with this grape? Probably similar to Pinot Grigio or an unoaked Chardonnay. So nothing like your California Chardonnay in any way, shape, or form, but definitely has a bright acidity to it. So this is cultivated all across the southern part of Italy, all the way up to Puglia, the heel of the boot of Italy, down to the football that's being kicked by the boot of Italy that is Sicily that we've got here. Now, there is a really fun part of this one, Rick. This is what I love. Since you've definitely got experience walking through vineyards in Sicily, what I love about this grape is it changes colors when it's ready to be picked. This is a fun one. Starts off that typical bright green color, but then it turns into this golden honey color as it is ready to be picked. So it just has a signaling to the winemaker that makes it very easy of I'm ready to go, I'm ready to produce some wine.
Take me. All right.
Have a lot of fun with it. So let's give this wine a good swirl, smell, and taste here. And for those of you that are tasting along with us at home, really just kind of get a good sense of it, especially when you taste it. We like to always encourage to savor. Just sit there, let it sit on your tongue. What are you tasting? What are you getting out of it? Is it a quick hint of flavor? Is it building? Does it stick with you? Does it have texture to the mouth? Is it more like water? What are the different presentations that we're getting out of this one?
You know, that aeration is really important, isn't it? And I think a lot of people are a little timid about swirling it around, but you can give it a good swirl.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Giving it that good swirl really gets some extra air to it just to open it up, especially before you give it a smell. And then if you really want to practice, really getting that air just kind of almost, I always refer to it as like a reverse whistle
Yeah.
that we've got in there is kind of the way to do it, to get a little bit of extra air on that one as well as you're pulling it in. Definitely can bring that little bit of extra air, make it a little bit more perceptible with this one.
You know,
Now,
that
Rick,
really helps when you whistle inward. It almost sends it up into your nasal cavity.
100%.
You know, poof.
pulls it
Yeah,
all right in.
yeah,
Absolutely. 'Cause what I forget what the percentage is. There's some statistic of like your nose is what percentage of your taste or something like that.
yeah.
That's like 50% of your ability to taste. So yes, really getting that slurp
Well,
and really helps.
Colton, you're a sommelier. If you're all stuffed up and have a cold, you might as well not go to work.
100%. I'm just barely tasting anything. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I'm ready to get out of winter time. That is for sure.
Yeah,
Ready to get out of winter. But
that's the one of my favorite techniques when I'm enjoying wine anywhere is to suck in and then enjoy as that beautiful personality of the wine sort of fills your head.
absolutely. 100%. And that's the way we want to fully appreciate the wine and get to it. Now, one thing I think you might notice with this, Rick,
Mm.
does it by chance to you smell sweeter than it tastes?
This is what is my biggest frustration as a as a rookie, and you're a pro on this. I I really enjoyed the bouquet of this more than I thought I would, and the taste I enjoy too, but it's different. It's a little bit deceptive.
Absolutely.
It's kind of a bait and switch.
100%. And this is very common of a lot of different varietals of wine. And I think this is one that very much shows that where you smell it, and it has kind of talking about the fact that the grape turns into this like nice golden honey color when it's ready to be picked. It smells of that honey. It smells honey, honeysuckle, maybe a
Ah,
hint of citrus, but you get to the flavor and that sweetness is not there. There's a little kick of sweetness that's in there, but it's far more tart and acidic on its presentation. Still has some rich fruits, but definitely does give you a little bit of a bait and switch. Your brain does play tricks on you. You smell, you're like, oh, this is
but
going to be sugar.
that tartness is delightful, and I have the advantage for somebody who's not been to Sicily of walking through a meadow with all sorts of beautiful flowers approaching a Greek temple,
Hmm.
knowing that the Greeks came there 500 years before Christ. They called it Magna Graecia, Greater Greece. It was one of their colonies, and they brought with them this wine culture.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of history into this.
Absolutely.
And if you've been there, it really is fun. Whether it actually reminds me of what I was tasting or drinking there, I don't know. But knowing this is from Sicily, it kindles those beautiful memories, and I love it.
100%. Well, and you know what? And I think beyond just kindling those memories, Rick, I think it's also not a horrible idea that I think this wine actually would pair very well with looking at those ruins whilst walking through in
Yeah.
the, hot Sicilian sun. This would be a nice, perfect pairing to just cool one down.
Now, that's an important point I think to make is that you may like a wine, but that doesn't mean you like it in all circumstances. You may like a wine that's refreshing for a walk in the meadow, or you may like a wine that's really good for some wild boar.
Hmm.
And I'm not talking about your travel partner, okay? You can use that.
That's great.
So I like full-bodied wines, but this is far from full-bodied, but this would be very nice for a walk in the meadow, I would think.
Absolutely. Walk in the meadow. And then also anytime you're dealing with something that's like a very light white fish that you're getting somewhere right on the port, this is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely going to be perfect with that, especially a wine like this that has a bright citrus acidity to it.
Yeah.
Anytime you put a lemon squeeze over a food, imagine pairing this wine with it and it'll go absolutely perfectly. Well,
Um,
Rick, one thing I will say is that, since we did Salute at the beginning, we have Robert who is wondering, what is your favorite toast? What is your favorite word to use, turn of phrase to use when you want to toast?
well, you want to use whatever people are using in that culture. It's just part of your desire as a good traveler to be a cultural chameleon. You don't. I don't eat cannoli every day. I probably almost never eat it. But when I'm in Sicily, I will have on my checklist tonight for dessert cannoli. And I probably wouldn't eat it in the restaurant. I'd probably go get it at a bakery and
Mhm.
have it fresh. And and I would say Santé. Or, there's I guess if I was to say which one I like best, I kind of like Nastrave because that's Slavic and that's it's sort of a bullying kind of camaraderie, Nastrave. Uh, and I can remember it because I always think nice driving, nice driving. Nastrave. But
I love that. It shows a certain level of just dedication to that
oh,
cheers that you're giving. I love
well,
that.
and Russians drink their liquor with attitude. Let's put it that way. And it's a forceful nastrave. But of course, in Italy, Sante. Ah, I love it. Yeah. Or not.
Well, see,
No, it's no salute. Salute. Yeah.
Salute. Exactly.
Salute.
Well, I will tell you, talking about cannolis, really, really, well, excuse me, I should use the correct Italian. Talking about cannoli, because cannoli is already plural. I should know this, jumping into this one. It just makes me want one of the authentic ones that has the ricotta in it, not any sort of puff pastry, no
Oh,
cream.
oh,
I want the
any
real
cannoli that
thing.
is souped up and amped up by somebody in a tourist shop in Florence, forget it. When you go to Sicily, it's a religious thing to eat the cannoli properly. And I'm not cannoli is not one of my favorite things, but when I'm in Sicily, it is so good. It'll be anybody's favorite thing. And part of it again is the atmosphere, the conviviality, you're part of the whole scene. A glass of wine with some fresh seafood, and then getting out and doing the passeggiata. In Sicily, a lot of times that's the paseo we say in Spanish, but everybody's out and strolling. It's a multi-generational parade of life. In much of Italy, they call it the vasca. That means the laps. And people are just doing their laps as they have all their life with the same gang from school. And it's good living Italian style, that's for sure. And if it's lubricated with a little nice wine, it's even better.
Well, and I think a lot of people, especially those that have traveled to Italy, are surprised when they hear that Sicily makes the wine that it does. I think a lot of people think of the Sicilian coastline. It's warm, it's Mediterranean. How are you growing grapes? But you've
Oh,
got to go further up Mount Etna. You've got to
oh,
get
we're
up
going to be.
there.
I would imagine. I'm looking at 6 wines here, and apparently most of them are Sicilian. And I would bet several of them are from the slopes of Mount Etna. And
Yes.
that's my wine tasting experience, mostly in Sicily, is that wonderful black shale or that black
Mm.
soil that's so good for absorbing the heat and retaining that heat through the night. And there's just something that vintners are trying to get their wine growing on the slopes of the most alive volcano in Europe, Mount Etna.
Absolutely. Well, and I think there's something so beautiful about using the hills of the most active volcano in Europe as the place to grow grapes. It's like, well, it can be destructive, but also there's so much nutrient and beauty and life that also
Yeah,
comes from said hills and volcanoes. So this is the fruits of the volcano right here.
I've got memories of going to a vintner's uh, uh, place, and he's got these beautiful vineyards, and you've got the slopes of Mount Etna, and then where they like to taste their wine, they've got this massive grape press. You've probably seen them, and I guess it would be, horse or donkey, pony powered or something that would go around and crush the grapes, and just the history there. A lot of times when we talk about terroir, that's a French concept of the sun, the soil, the tradition, and everything. I mean, it's a French word, but it's an Italian thing as well. Any vintner whose family has been there for many generations, bringing the beautiful grapes right out of that soil. There's that heritage, that tradition, that terroir. And I think history and family pride takes on almost a physical additive value to the wine. There's something about it. And when you're right there, it adds to the wine drinking experience.
100%. Seeing and understanding the sense of place as you're enjoying that wine. That's a certain
And
level.
and also, Colton, the family pride. I'll never forget in Italy going to a friend's farm, which for generations has made wine, not to export, but just for their community. And we come in there with one of my groups, and we gather around. They give us some cold cuts and so on from the farm, and then we have, of course, wine. And there's 3 generations there, and grandma is sitting. She doesn't get around that much anymore. She used to welcome the tourists, but she's sitting on the side of the room, just observing, beaming with pride, as her granddaughter picks up the bottle, and it's a little, not quite as stubby as this bottle, an elegant bottle, and the family name is on there. And I'll never forget how the granddaughter held it with the family name kind of framed by her hand. And then you had three generations and you're in the same farm and so much pride. And then to see them pour that and to be, it's sort of like a communing together with the heritage. And the wine was excellent. And to be there to experience that. And then we'd go through it's like a secret door in the kitchen, and you think it's going into a pantry, but it's leading to a staircase that goes down, directly down a couple flights, and you realize we're descending into an Etruscan cave network. And for literally centuries, it has been a place where they stored their wine as it aged. And you'd see that, and to be the whole experience of being there, it makes tasting that same wine away from its home a little bit at a disadvantage. So when we are on the road, take every opportunity we can get to meet the people that are proud of the wine, get to know them. A lot of them rent out a room in an agriturismo. A lot of them might give tours. It's a business, you probably pay for the tour, but it can be a real great experience to carbonate that whole degustazione thing. I would imagine degustazione means wine tasting.
There you go. Absolutely. There's something about seeing someone who's multi-generational in wine, who, I mean, no pun intended, wine just flows through their veins and the pride that they have with it. Absolutely. And you said something about, how enjoyable it is to watch them pour it. And, I think that's a good point to say, let's pour our next wine, Rick. Let's move into that next wine. And that is going to be our Andiamo Grecanico. Andiamo Grecanico is going to be the next one. I'm going to try to put it in front of my face so that my Zoom background doesn't eat it on me. It always has a funny way of just completely taking it on me when I do that. So this is our next wine, Andiamo, which means let's go in Italian. Kind of a little exciting one. Looks very
Andiamo. Nice.
Andiamo. Let's go. So let's go into our next one. And we've received some questions about what you should do with your wine glass as you're transitioning between each of these wines. A quick suggestion if you're transitioning. Once you are done with the liquid of the wine that we just finished in the first glass, throw a small splash of that next wine into the glass, heavily swirl that around, and then you can drink that little bit in your glass quickly like a shot. What does this all do as we go through this process? What this does is it takes out the residual of the prior wine. It then coats our glass with what we're going into. And then that little bit on your tongue that you did during the transition, that's actually a good transition sip between the wines as well. So feel free to go for it. Rick is demonstrating as we speak.
Yeah, it's what we call pirate's punch.
Pirate's punch. I love that. So, and I'm very frequent, just to quickly anticipate the question, because a number of individuals ask, well, why would I not actually clean my glass out with water? Big reason why we don't do that is that water has a different viscosity than wine does because it does not have alcohol in it. So that water will actually stick into your glass and will actually dilute your next sip, which is the reason why we like to splash the wine glass out with a little bit of the next one instead.
And Colton, even that notion of being sure to thoroughly rinse away the previous wine, is that important for you with the refined taste that you would have as a sommelier, that the next wine, you can't really understand it, even if there's a little bit of the previous wine in there?
Yeah, you definitely, let me say this, I'm probably not as horridly strict with it, but yeah, it's definitely good to swish that out because, for example, if you have something that would be a really different note that's in the prior wine, it might linger a little bit and you'll be like, oh, I'm still getting some similar notes of the prior wine, and it's good to kind of clean it out.
But if you are at a party and you've still got an inch of wine and somebody's opened up a new bottle and they're saying, oh, just here's some more, that's going to be not a good thing.
Well, let's say this, if they're both wines you enjoy and you're just having fun and you've had enough glasses, then you know what, there's nothing holding you back. But for wine purity's sake, I bet you there's a sommelier on this call that says, Colton, absolutely clean your glass out first, 100%.
That, I'm not even that sophisticated about it, but I do not like to mix wine. I just like to know that this is my, my Vino Rosso Montepulciano. Okay, I don't want a little bit of Chianti in that because it's just going to violate the purity of it.
100%. When you want to taste that sense of place, you want that one place on its own. Absolutely.
Well, let's stop talking.
Okay. Definitely understand that one.
Drink it.
Let's move into this next wine here. So we've got, this is our Grecanico is the one that we're working with here. So this is also another Sicilian varietal. So this is a good moment to say, again, we're talking a lot of wines from Sicily. And again, Sicily is a very significant portion of the Italian wine production. 10%, more than 10% of what Italy produces in wine comes from Sicily itself. As Rick mentioned, there is something very special about that volcanic soil that really creates such a special place for it. But it's not just the soil, it's also the higher elevation as well. When we're that close to the equator, we need a little bit of a cooler climate. So getting a little bit higher gets that cooler climate. And then you also get the advantage of being more directly in the sun as well. So it's this perfect trifecta of good soil, good sunlight, and good temperature at that higher altitude that really brings it together as well. Now, not only has, in probably I'd say the last 40 or 50 years, Sicily become known as a new location of fine wine production. Because of that, we also see a number of French varietals going in there as well. So they're really acting in many ways kind of like an innovative wine region that has a variety of different grapes that are coming into it beyond just what was traditionally in Sicily itself. That being said, this one that we've got in our glass right here, the Grecanico, this originates from Sicily itself. And you might have actually had this grape before, you just weren't aware that you've had it. A DNA study that happened in the mid-2000s ended up finding that Garganega, the name of a grape in northern Italy, turns out genetically the identical grape to Grecanico, which is interesting because if you make Grecanico the feminine, Grecanica, what does it sound like? Garganega. They sound very similar to each other, and turns out, funny enough, actually the same grape. So we do see this grape all across Italy. But this version, whenever you're getting that rich Sicilian sun, is really going to push some good growth in it, really some strong fruitiness. And then also you might notice a little bit of that Mediterranean Sea, a hint of it in here, which we can talk about in a moment. So everyone, give this wine a swirl, give it a smell, and also give it a taste. Now, first and foremost, Rick, is this similar to what you tasted with the Fiano? Is it different? How is it hitting you on this one?
It does have a little, it's not quite as light and happy. It's a little more, um, maybe I'm just cheating because you've led me there, but I can taste the more of the Mediterranean. The sea.
Yeah, it's there's almost kind of a slightly savory and salty note to this one, where the prior wine was definitely more hinted lighter, hinting sweeter on the fruits. This just has a saltiness and very much a deeper tartness to it as well.
Now,
Absolutely.
would that be, because it seems to me that would be more fun with seafood. Would you enjoy this with seafood or would you prefer the other one?
100%. Well, honestly, both of these wines go very fabulously with seafood. I think
Yeah.
the prior wine, you could say, that goes a little bit more with a lighter white fish or maybe salads, whereas this one, I think we can go a little bit heavier, maybe hinting at a slightly darker fish. On this one, this can definitely be in the white wine category, going a little bit further into that. But definitely, absolutely, this wine is a seafood wine at its
Or
finest.
shellfish. This might go good with shellfish.
100%.
Yeah, because
Freshly cracked shellfish.
yeah, that makes sense to me. I can think of this as it fits shellfish, and the other would have a nice flaky white fish.
100%. I would
Yeah.
totally agree with that. But yeah, this wine, when you smell it, it definitely doesn't have the rich sweetness of that prior wine. This one's a little bit more consistent where it smells tart, tastes tart. And I think the driving flavor on this one is very much like a crunchy green apple. Is absolutely what kind of
That's good.
gives the kind of presentation of this one. And one thing you'll also notice about this, one thing that is very quintessential of a lot of Italian wines, is an herbaceousness, a little baking spice in it. And there's a nice, you really smell it. There's just like a hint of Italian herb on the aroma of this one that just gives it this
Herbaceousness, that's a good word.
Is that's a fun one. That is not original to me, Rick, but you are more than welcome to take it. That is for sure
That's
true.
never rolled off of my tongue before. Herbaceous. I like it.
A little herbaceous.
Oh,
Yeah.
baby, that's herbaceous. Yeah.
Some freshly cut herbs right before cooking. A little bit of this
I
goes
want
a
to
long way
stress for
too.
people to do that. If you've never done it, don't be embarrassed. Make the whistling sound while bringing air in, and notice how that kicks the flavor up into your nasal cavity.
Ah, see, he's got the microphone ready to go. Absolutely.
Mmm.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
That amps up the flavor. That's cheating. Oh, it's nice. See, that's like when I go to a concert and I want to hear the whole variety of all the instrumentation, I do this.
Hmm.
And even right now, I can hear more detail. I know what's making the sound of my voice because there's many different tones, different melodies in there. And that would be an audio equivalent of aerating your wine, I think.
Yes, very much so. You know, it's interesting, Rick. There's got to be some entrepreneurial venture out there that has created some sort of like physical thing that can push your ears out for a concert.
My dad and I were going to patent that. We were going to call
I
it,
love this.
it was going to be stereo ears.
Stereo ears. I
And I
love
was
them.
going to make my fortune at 12 years old and retire and just do this all the time.
I love this that there is an alternate universe somewhere, Rick, where little Rick Steves at 12 years old becomes an entrepreneurial tycoon in his own piece of earwear. I love this.
Earwear. Yeah, baby. Well, too bad I ended up in travel. Oh well.
Too bad. Well, you know
But
what?
still,
Too bad for you and great for us because it is a pleasure to watch. That is for sure.
I get to go to beautiful architectural spaces, acoustical spaces, and hear beautiful either vocal or instrumental music with my stereo ears. And oh yeah, it makes you look a little goofy, but it reminds you of how much is there. And then you don't have to listen to it all the way, you're just more appreciative of it. And that's one reason to try that suck in and that aeration, I think. It's
Absolutely.
damps it up.
To actively perceive it. Well, Rick, I've got a great question that came in from Mary. She was asking, when you are traveling in Europe, how do you balance visiting famous tourist attractions while also finding hidden gems? What's your secret on that one?
You know, sometimes I feel like I'm working really hard in my hotel room, and I feel like I've been in here typing away on my laptop for 4 hours. I need to get out and travel to breathe in the culture. And I leave my guidebook there. I don't have any checklist. And I feel like I get swept away by the tide of that culture. Literally, I leave my hotel in Palermo or Catania or Rome or Napoli, especially Napoli. And you get, it's like an undertow can take you away and it can be dangerous. And I just let myself go that way. So I'm usually, I've got a list of sites I got to see, restaurants I got to visit. I'm updating my guidebooks, I'm preparing our tours and so on, or making it, scouting for a TV show. But I always carve out some time to let go. It's like I'm holding on to the bow pulpit of the boat, and this current is taking me away, and I let go. And then I just glide through the town. I was doing that in Naples just a couple months ago. And I was doing that, and I was making eyes with people up on their balconies. I dropped into a tailor, a cobbler's place. I said, I've got, my shoe is kind of coming apart, and it's going to be a drag to get it fixed when I get back home, and it'll cost me a fortune. I'm going to just find a cobbler, an old school cobbler on a cobbled lane. And I found a cobbler, and I dropped in there, and it was a beautiful moment. And I didn't speak Italian to him, and he didn't speak English to me. We connected. He was so proud. I'm sure he was doing what his father had done. And we thanked each other. I put my shoe back on. I asked him how much, and he said, it's a gift. Nice to see you. Bon voyage, or bon viaggio, Those are the moments you get when you let go and you let the tide take you away. And you can certainly do that in Sicily, where this wine is from.
Mhm.
The markets are. We're just finishing a show about the best of Italy, a special little TV show we're making, and the finale of the Sicily show is an orchestra of the barkers in a market screaming about what they're selling and what's fresh and how good their, boiled octopus is and how good their, sausage is or whatever. And this barking has a melodic sense to it. And I was working with my TV crew, and we actually put operatic singing over it. And then we have this montage of barkers in the market selling their meat and cheese and vegetables and olives and oil. And then it slowly subsides, and the operatic singing continues, and it morphs into a very romantic scene with lovers strolling on the waterfront under the bougainvillea. And it was just one of the most beautiful things we've ever filmed. And it was just a couple of days ago that we were working on that. And it's that opportunity to let yourself go, say yes to serendipity, and to become a temporary local.
Absolutely. Well, I cannot wait to see that melodic opera overlay with the people that were yelling and screaming in the market about about their specific items in Sicily. I cannot wait to see that.
It
That is
is,
going to be
it is
fantastic
good.
to
It is
see.
good. But the point is, Colin, as a tourist, you could lose yourself in those markets, and
Absolutely.
and with a little bit of a spirit of poetic freedom, you could let those otherwise annoying guys yelling "bolito, bolito, bolito," you could turn it into a symphony, a tasty, fragrant, unforgettable symphony.
I love this. Well, and if I'm reading this correctly, Rick, it sounds like we all on all of our trips, it's good to structure some parts, but got to give some time to let the wind just take you through the
Oh,
town.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And in fact, I like going to places that don't have sites that are famous. And every day you just walk in a different direction and it entertains you. It's getting hard to find that in Europe the way you might hope. But if you get outside of Europe, I was just in Morocco, or I'm heading over to Turkey with our crew in a little while. Um, in places like that, oh, it's amazing how if you just walk away from the tourists, away from the canned culture on stage with the 400 tourists and folding chairs, emptying out of 8 buses and then heading back to their cruise ships, if you just get away from that, um, 2025, you can still find it.
Mhm.
I'm sort of into that right now because I just gotta mention this because I'm very excited about um, my coming of age trip. When I was 23 years old, I wrote into a 60,000 word journal, and I uncovered this just during COVID, and I've written it, and now this book just came out this last week, and I'm going around the country, but it's a handwritten journal when I was 23 years old. Before I knew I was going to Europe, I wrote this when I was this guy. I was a piano teacher then, and I just traveled in the summer because the kids wouldn't practice. But it's called On the Hippie Trail. Imagine sitting in that bus and going from Istanbul to Kathmandu.
Oh gosh.
And the point was, you didn't have any famous sites, but you just found the sites. And we can do that today. That's the theme of this book. The hippie trail is closed. You can't go through Afghanistan and Iran like you used to be able to. But you go to Europe, you go to Latin America, you take a bike ride across the deep south in this country, you can find this stuff, and
Mhm.
you can lose yourself in it. And in doing so, you can kind of find yourself, and you become
Absolutely.
somebody who sees the road as playground, school, and church.
That's fantastic. That's inspiring me for my next trip. I love that, Rick. So, well, without further ado, I think to bring a couple more stories out of you, Rick, I think we need another wine in our glass with that one. So our next wine is going to be our Rosato d'Italia. So this is our rosé wine that we've got here. So Rosato d'Italia, balance of powers is what we're working with here. So this wine that we have here, it's, as you can very clearly see, it is a rosé wine. We'll talk a little bit about rosé production when we get into it, how we get this lovely pink color. But one question that I did receive in the chat was a question about stemless versus stemmed wine glasses, stemless versus stemmed.
Oh.
And I know with an audience of this size, there have got to be some wine professionals that are joining me on the call, and they might keel over when they hear how I feel about stemless and stemmed wine glasses. The only reason, just anatomically, why do we have a stem on the glass? All it comes down to, we do not want to heat up our wine. The reason why we encourage you to cool all of your wines ahead of the tasting is that once we hit about the halfway point, those red wines are warming up to about a temperature of 60, 65 degrees. And that's about where we want to enjoy red wine as well. So we actually want red wine a little bit cooler than room temperature, and then white wine a little bit warmer than your fridge. So with this in mind, if you have your hand on it, which of course your internal body temperature averaging about 98 degrees, you're going to sit there and just be warming up your glass. So here's how I feel about it. If you are seated at a dinner, and you're not holding onto your wine glass, perfectly fine. Use a stemless glass. It will be seated on the table and you're not heating the glass. If you're going to be standing at a cocktail hour and are forced to hold on to the glass, that is a time when you will want a stemless glass, and is a little bit more of a requirement, at least in my humble opinion.
But apart from all that temperature stuff, Colton, this is just more elegant.
It is. It 100%.
I don't understand why there is that question. Why, unless you're on I don't know, in some scenario where you can't have a stemmed glass, but it's rare to have something this elegant in my world. This is probably one of the most elegant things in my house right here, just a simple stemmed glass.
And see, here's the thing, Rick, is in one's day-to-day life, one typically is not going for elegant, one is going for practical, and a wine glass with a stem typically does not fit in the top rack of one's dishwasher as easily as a stemless glass might.
I hope nobody's drinking straight out of the bottle. That's easier yet. Do you think, what do we have? We have 4,000 or 5,000 people watching us right now. Out of that many, I bet somebody is just drinking it out of the bottle.
That person or said individuals are chuckling very heavily right now from you saying that.
Go ahead. It's a free world. I don't want to be judgmental. That'd be bad style.
I am a firm believer. See, I have my dump bucket over here is a red Solo cup, and you should see on the many tastings I've done over the years, this is sometimes the receptacle of choice. And I always like to joke that any glass with wine in it is a wine glass. There are a lot of people who disagree with that, but as long as you're enjoying it, I think that's the important part.
A coffee mug. Could do it. When you're camping, sometimes you need to.
There you go. Alrighty, so jumping into this rosé, this lovely rosato. Excuse me. Yeah, I shouldn't use the French rosé. This is rosato. Is what we're working with here. So this lovely pink color, where do we get that lovely bright pink color from? And that is coming from the grape skins of red grapes. The grape skins of red grapes is where we get this from. How do we do that? Well, interestingly enough, the vast majority, 99% of wine producing grapes in the world, even those dark, heavy Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot Malbec grapes, when you squeeze them, the juice is clear. So how do we get that color into the wine? Reintroduce those grape skins to the wine. So in the case of red wines, we put those grape skins back on the juice while it's fermenting. So as it's converting that sugar into alcohol, we're pulling all this color, texture, and flavor from the skin into the juice to give it that body density and its texture. But in the case of a rosé wine, we don't want density. We don't want too much heft, but we do want to get a little bit of a different color and a little bit of a different flavor. So in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to take those grape skins, reintroduce it to the juice for maybe a few hours, potentially overnight, depending on the depth of color and flavor of that rosé that you're looking for, but just quickly expose it, give it some color, give it some flavor, pull it off. So we're dealing with something that has the body of a white wine, but still has a little bit of a different character, different flavor category coming from those grape skins. So then it begs the question, what grape was used to produce this rosé? So this rosé was produced of the Sicilian grape Nerello Cappuccio, which you're like, why does that sound familiar? Well, that is because one of our red wines is a Nerello Cappuccio, and we'll talk a little bit more about that grape in a few moments with this one as well.
So it's
So
the same grape. They just went lighter on the skins.
exactly. Yep. Just produced it differently. Exact same grapes, exact
Yeah,
same juice, just different amount of grape skin contact with that juice on this one.
nice.
So I did have a question. See, Mark, one of our audience members is questioning you, Rick. He says, "Do aerators really make a difference to the smell and taste of wine?" So questioning your theory, Rick, on aerating the wine. Now, let me say this. I will say an aerator to be used in a wine glass, the best way, the way you can avoid using fancy aerators or anything else, is just to simply decant a bottle of wine, especially for dark, heavy
Oh,
red wines. And when I say decant, I like to deconstruct this. You do not need a fancy decanter. All you need is a water pitcher. Anything where the wine can sit out in the air is more than enough, especially for those dark red wines, especially wines that have been aged for a significant period of time, say 10,
mm,
15, 20 years. You're absolutely going to want to get extra time to that.
mm.
Now, let's talk about the practical. You've just welcomed people over for a dinner party and you want that red wine to be fresh and available right now as you're cracking it open. An
Mhm.
aerator can help what we refer to as bruise the wine. Get a little bit of extra air. Those aerators really let it splash around, get some more air into it very quickly. That can definitely help with it. But it's very hotly debated as to whether or not those fancy aerators are really bringing any value for it. But so you look so perplexed, Rick.
Well, I didn't know there was this area. What I do, I've got a souvenir from Portugal that I love, and this is my wine, my port wine aerator. And a man who makes lovely port wine gave this to me. It comes with its little container holder like this. I'm amazed I ever got it home on the flight. But when you pour a little wine in here, and then you sip it through like a little pipe. Mm, that aerates it, at least for the Portuguese. And I found that that's kind of cheating. I mean, I should have 20 of these, so if people drop into a party and I forgot to open the bottles, everybody grabs one of these and we're all right.
See, I love the idea of this, Rick. You welcome people over for a dinner party, and everyone sees these wine glasses lined up, and then they see one of those placed next to it, like, what is this? And you're like, let me tell you.
Look at that cool thing. I love that.
It's fun. But yes, it's all a matter of getting extra oxygen into that wine, is really going to be it. Because the more oxygen, the more it's had that exposure, the more essentially those particles, those flavors are opening up and bursting,
Hmm.
is the way that I like
So
to describe it.
it's a physical thing. Air
Absolutely.
opens up. I mean, it's a chemical, right? Or whatever.
Mhm.
It
Well,
opens up.
and the way that I also like to describe it is you can think about it, if you've got, like, for example, just a big block of ice, the more that you break that ice, the more that it's able to melt and it's able to open up.
Yeah.
If it's just one big block of ice, there's nothing in it. You can't get to the inside of that and perceive that because it's all one block. But if it's
Ah,
all in little pieces and it's all melted out, that's where you can really get the depth and full flavor of it.
Colton, you are so good at making complicated wine related things understandable. That is beautiful. I will
Well,
probably
I'm
forget it, but it is beautiful.
Well, I am flattered, Rick. We'll see. This is see. I hopefully I will only ever to aspire to be the wine world what you are to the travel world. So we'll work on it. We'll work
I
on
think
it.
this is our third or fourth wine tasting, and you've just got lots of ways that we can better appreciate wine. And that's my theme lately as a travel writer and a tour guide, is the more understanding we bring to our culture, our sightseeing, the art. And this is art. I mean, this is art, you see. The more understanding and context we bring to it, the more we get out of it. And people are always asking me for budget tips, and everybody's going to pay the same to take the ride up Mount Etna in Sicily. But if you understand about the volcano and the culture around it and how it's been with the community since ancient Greek times, you double your appreciation. And the same is true, I think, as you illustrate with wine appreciation. And that's why it's just so gratifying when you organize people's travels to expose them, not just to fine wine, but to the people who make it, and to have an opportunity to let them share their passion for this slice of their art and their culture. And then for the rest of our travel and days, we better appreciate that little bit of what makes life so good on this planet.
Absolutely, 100%. Get that sliver of what makes each one of those little individual places special. Absolutely, which is leads to a very kind of topical question. Oh, we get the good slurp. I was talking too much, Rick. We couldn't get your good aeration directly from the microphone. But talking about enjoying certain locations, we do have a number of individuals have asked a very similar question. We've got Cookie, Becky, and a number of others who have asked how climate change is affecting the wines from Sicily. Maybe you have specific anecdotes, Rick, but I can start the conversation about this, that climate change is affecting pretty much every wine region in the world. The prime example that I love to give is outside of the world of Italy. It is in France, Champagne. The French have very strict laws about what you can do, what grapes you can grow, and how you're able to operate. And they're having to break those rules because the climates are changing.
Wow.
Interestingly enough, you might find in the not too distant future that the climate of old Champagne of 10 years prior, that actually might be the climate of southern UK. So you might start seeing sparklings coming from the southern part of the UK, planting of the same grapes as well, that you see there. So truthfully, it is going to change that. And we're probably going to have to change many of the grapes that we grow in certain climates because of the fact that new warmer climate or new cooler climate, depending on the location, might end up hinting at a different grape that serves better in that place.
I was with a vintner who is an aristocrat in France. His family has owned this chateau for generations and centuries. And it was in Burgundy, where the finest wine in France is, I believe. And we were on a little boutique floating hotel on a former industrial age barge. And this is a thing. You cruise the canals of Burgundy on a little barge. You've got a captain, a first mate, and a chef. And it's a decadent, hedonistic sort of thing to do, cruising through all these wonderful, the best vineyards in the world. And we walked from a lock where we tied up the barge up into the little village and found a chateau. And we take our tour groups to this guy, so we knew the man. And he welcomed us with our TV camera. This is a show that's coming out. And it was something I've never seen before. In France, they have different kinds of real estate that determines the quality of the wine, and it can vary a lot just by 100 meters or something. And there's the word clos. And clos is literally a square, a enclosed area that was defined by a rock wall 1,000 years ago in this village. And for 1,000 years, they've been growing their wine, and the best wine, because of the terroir and the sun and the soil, was this clos. That's the most expensive, the finest wine, and it was defined by those 1,000-year-old rock walls. And we went in there and did the whole thing, learning about the wine, and then we went into his chateau and tasted it. Later on, we were standing out there in the clos again, and we looked out, and there's a hill, and it's got vineyards and vineyards, and then it's got forests on the top of the hill. And he said, we are heartbroken about this, but we got to be active because of climate change. And they're thinking they got to cut down that forest on the top of the hill in order to move their vines up the hill so they can escape the consequences of the climate change in that ecosystem below. And all over the world, whether you're, making beautiful wine for privileged people who can travel on a barge, or whether you're a farmer in Guatemala trying to just feed your kids, climate change, it's having an impact. And it's fun to think that Norway may have wine in the future, but the flip side of that coin is not very pretty. And, it's just one of the values of travel is we gain an appreciation for many things. The love between a parent and a child, the fragility of nature, the beauty of a nice wine, and also the tragedy of ignoring something like this and thinking what it's going to do to these traditions. I mean, I don't want one generation old wine industry in Denmark. I want 1,000-year-old wine industry from people who really know how to do it and love it and are passionate about it in Burgundy or in Sicily or Tuscany.
Yeah, growing the native grapes of that region that, as we preserve said climate, allows said original grapes to still flourish. Absolutely.
It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to celebrate and to value, to value. So, let's drink to that. This is, I like this rosé, by the way, Colton.
It smells it's got such a rich fruitiness to it. So to quickly talk about what you might be finding in this one, it has such a burst of berry fruits. This is very quintessential of a lot of styles of rosé, but especially when we're talking a rosé produced of red wine grapes from strong sunlight like you see in Sicily, going to lead to a much fuller, mature grape. So just that burst of red berry, strawberry, raspberry on the presentation. Still doesn't mean there isn't a hint of any sort of like tartness. There is still is an acidity to this, a little zesty citrus kind of in the background of it. But one thing that is going to be a theme that continues through these Sicilian wines is always going to be a little, and bringing it back, herbaceousness. There's a little bit of a hint of garden herb in it. Such a quintessential note of a lot of these Italian wines. We absolutely see that. And what I love about this one, it finishes with a nice little subtle minerality on the back end of it as well. That really volcanic soil really kind of shows itself there in the juice on top of it.
Colton, I've lived my life thinking rosé is simple, refreshing wine of mediocre quality at best. I get a sense that it's changed in the last generation and people are taking it more seriously, and we're actually getting fine wine that happens to be rosé.
Absolutely. And you know what? And the one thing I would say, Rick, is many of the French, especially French winemakers in the south of France near Provence and in Rhone, would absolutely love to disagree with you and tell you that there has been fine rosé been being produced for hundreds of years at this point. But I would absolutely agree with it. I think especially in the US market, such an emphasis and belief that dark pink wines like white Zinfandel really soiled the name of rosé here in the US
Yeah,
market.
because I always thought rosé came out of a big box.
That's where it comes off. It's the leftovers of some white wine, some red wine. We slapped it together and put it into a box. I love
And
it.
it's not expensive and it does the
Right.
trick.
Absolutely. So no, but there's really has been an emphasis, especially with the blossoming of the phrase rosé all day. Absolutely something that there's really some high quality rosé and dry rosés with this one
Yeah,
as well.
nice.
Now to talk about some pairings with this one, because we've had a lot of people that are really enthusiastic about what they can pair with these types of wines. Something that I think talking about an Italian, staple that I think would be absolutely fabulous with this one, a caprese salad with a little balsamic on it. Sounds fantastic with this one. And Rick is actually testing right now whether or not it goes with olives.
Well, the olives are in my caprese salad, so.
Oh, I love that. And then also a cheese. We're going to pair it with a cheese, a little burrata. Just a fresh burrata sounds fabulous with this. But yeah, definitely something that's we're not trying to do something that's too hefty or overpowering. One kind of general principle with wine pairing with food: weight with weight, heavy with heavy, light with light. So this is still, it's got a little bit of a richer flavor than maybe some white wines, but we still want to go with something that's lighter and not too heavy of a food with that one. Alrighty, well, now, Rick, one thing I must say is that, especially with an audience of this size, I am certain that we have a number by the hundreds of individuals on this call that are my diehard red wine drinkers that have just been so patiently waiting for something worth drinking on the second half of this tasting. And I'm happy to report we are finally going to veer into the world of our red wines here. And that first one that we are going to work with is going to be our Andiamo Nerello Cappuccio. Nerello Cappuccio is that one. And it may look a little bit like cappuccino, but there's no ino in there. It's just cappuccio is how we pronounce this one. So Nerello Cappuccio is.
Can I just try to say it? You probably speak more Italian than me. Vorrei un bicchiere di vino rosso, per favore.
Okay, so and what did you say, Rick?
I think I said I would like a glass of red wine, please.
And that is exactly what we will give you, Rick. Exactly what we
That's
will
good.
give you.
So I'm going to dump this little bit of rosé, and then I'm going to dig into my first red.
Fabulous.
One more sip of rosé.
Yes, absolutely. So our first wine that we've got here in the world of red wine. So Nerello Cappuccio, Nerello, sourcing from the word nero in Italian, nero being black. These are the dark, heavy red grapes of Sicily. So Nerello Cappuccio. One thing that you might not have seen before is this exact name on a wine bottle before. Reason being, this is kind of a unique take on what we're able to see with a red wine from Sicily, because Nerello Cappuccio is usually blended with its sister grape, Nerello Mascalese, which is the other wine that we have today. So this is a unique opportunity to see one of the quintessential Italian red grapes from Sicily on its own, not blended with anything else. Just like we've been talking about, this wine grape grows fabulously on volcanic soil at a higher elevation is what we're typically talking about. As one is escalating, I guess, up the hill to that elevation, is what we might say. But one kind of interesting thing, we talked about one of the prior wines actually being the same as another wine from another region. Funny enough, a 2010 study ended up finding that 70% of the Nerello Cappuccio was actually not native, interestingly enough. The vast majority of Nerello Cappuccio is actually Carignan, which is a French varietal, typically. And then others were also Sangiovese, a Northern Italian varietal. So funny enough, this is one of those moments where for years there's been heritage built on grapes that actually many, many millennia ago actually were sourced from a different location. So kind of a funny one. There's still a sense of pride, even though this might be a different grape being sourced from Sicily. We want to stay true. This is good old Nerello Cappuccio is what we will call with this one. So we've got this, we've got a good one coming in from Ashley. We've got a great question here for you, Rick. Where in Europe are the top 3 best locations where you have enjoyed a glass of wine?
Ah, that's quite funny. Ouzo's not wine, but it's a drink that's very local.
We can expand the question a little bit to where have you enjoyed an alcoholic beverage,
Because
your favorite
alcoholic
places?
beverage, sitting on an island in the Aegean Sea with the sun going down in a beautiful perch with a tiny harbor in front of you, and this beautiful Greek sea vista with rusty old ships on the horizon and the sun going down, and a nice cloudy glass of ouzo. That's a beautiful thing. Um, Having a dinner with a noble family on a farm in Tuscany where they're really into this concept of a 0 kilometer meal, where everything on the table, it's rustic, it's multi-generational, it's even more than that because you've got portraits of people from earlier generations all around you, reminding that the family's been here for ages, and you're drinking wine that is a good match with all the places that were created in the same community, with that local pride of the people. They know the people that baked this bread. They know the people that raised the pigs for this, prosciutto. They know the people that made the wine. To have all of that together, there's something beautiful about that. And the multi-generational. Again, you got grandma and you got the little girl right here who's still learning how to eat spaghetti with a fork. It's just, you're there in the middle of it and you got your wine, which is the way you all commune. That's one. And anytime I can leave a restaurant with a glass of dessert wine and go to the square and watch the floodlit facades of medieval glory all around me and just sit on that square, I'm thinking of, could well be Orvieto, it could well be Siena, it could be old Syracuse in Sicily. But I love to borrow a glass when I'm done, when I've paid for the meal and everything. And I just say, I want one last glass of Vino Santo, the dessert wine, and take it to the square and just savor my frame of mind and the community and the heritage that's all around me. That's a beautiful use of wine right there, I think.
Well, and there's something beautiful about having that wine of that place there, because it really does give a window of thousands of people who have stood in that same place
Yeah,
and
yeah,
enjoyed their livelihood in that specific area have enjoyed that same wine, it kind of brings you into a window of what that person experiences.
And it doesn't need to be a fine wine. I mean, it can be a good wine, but it's no pretentious wine at all. It's just the fruit of the vine. It's the fruit of that community. Another example would be in a village on the Riviera, the Cinque Terre. If people use my books or go on my tours, they'll know about the Cinque Terre. If you're out late, and I'm usually out late researching restaurants. Each evening I have a local guide, a food guide, and until there's nobody else eating, I am running around checking restaurants, and you can't research a restaurant unless there's people eating in it. And then just before they're locking it down, I will go back to my favorite restaurant, and the chef, he's happy to serve me, and I'll just say, give me whatever you want me to eat. You're closing down, and then I'll enjoy that. And then having that glass of wine there, especially if it's like on the harbor front, and you see the chefs all up and down, they've all done their work, and they're just outside having a drink or having a cigarette and just savoring a day's work well done, living where their grandparents lived, serving all the tourists coming and going. The tourists are back in the hotel now mostly. Their whole body clock is skewed by their work hours. And now they're done working and they're going to enjoy a few hours of good living with that whatever they're drinking or whatever they're smoking.
No, and your glass transports you a little bit into just their mentality. I love that.
Well, I gotta say, everybody knows the joy of feeling a little buzz from their wine. And if you can do that while trying to find your hotel in Venice, it really heightens the experience.
It gives you the full, true, authentic experience.
There's nothing like being not shit-faced, but just drunk enough where you're amused by yourself. You're having fun climbing the little bridges over each of the canals, and you're pretty sure your hotel's in this direction. I love that. And I love that so much. And if there wasn't, you know what that is? That's one of my favorite Italian words. Indimenticabile. How many syllables? Indimenticabile. That's unforgettable. Even if you've been drinking wine, it's unforgettable. And when you have a beautiful, magical evening in a place like Venice, and you are really just at the right spot because of that ambiance, the memories, the conviviality, the giggles that the wine has created, the joy of that experience, and taking that with you on the road into town without any cars.
100%.
Let's all say it together, please. Indimenticabile. Indimenticabile.
There you go.
And if you have a great glass of wine and you want to impress the people that offered it to you, you take a sip and you go, indimenticabile.
I love that. That's fantastic. Well, it's funny as we keep swirling and smelling it. What would be unforgettable of a pairing with this is you transported me. You're like these chefs outside their restaurants. Everything's done. If I were the tourist going into this, if this were I were just doing a late afternoon snack, a little bit of like a fontina cheese would be fabulous with this. And I think because this is going to be the lightest of the red wines that we have here, Italian wines, especially Italian red wines, are stereotypically fabulous with tomato-based sauces. But I don't want to go with something that's too meaty. I think an eggplant, like an eggplant parmesan sounds absolutely fantastic, or something that's got tomato base but also has a vegetable in it as well. I think.
And Colton, you were talking about a light cheese, weren't you, earlier? What fun?
I was.
Yeah, because this, I don't know what this would pair well with, but tasting this, it's just saying I need an edible buddy.
100%. I mean, wine is meant to be put with food. So let's see. What are we smelling? It gives me a little bit of the world of Pinot Noir, and there's a reason I say this, because Pinot Noir has both Pinot Noir and Nerello Cappuccio are known to absorb the world around it. And what we mean by that is that they've got this ability to kind of take on the essence of the world around it. And if you smell it, it smells of earth. It smells of dirt.
I love it. Yeah.
It just gives a little bit like almost like moss and forest floor. This is something we see in Burgundy, and I think this is another wine that really actively shows that. And let's see. So I get the earth.
Yeah. But
Mm,
wouldn't that bring us some, what would logically be a good pairing with this as far as what you might want to order on the menu?
Pretty much anything, any dish that I think that's going to have a tomato base is going to go fabulously with this because it's darker, but it also has an acidity. It can match the acidity and almost kind of cut through the acidity of something that's tomato based.
Because I'm not sophisticated enough to say, oh, you got to have your, your eggplant with your Barolo or whatever.
Mhm.
But when somebody who knows what they're doing, and a lot of people want to impress me because they want to impress me because they want to get in my book. So I'll go to the Enoteca. That's one of my favorite places to eat in Italy. And Enoteca, if I understand correctly, it's a wine focused tiny restaurant that just serves fine wine with well matched local
Mm,
dishes. Small dishes, not a heavy meal. But I think I like to go to Enoteca because my hunch is they open more expensive bottles of wine. And I don't want to spend $100 for a bottle of wine, but I do
right.
like to spend $20 for a glass of really, really good wine and then have it matched with a plate of what that um, proprietor knows will really turn me on. And
Mhm.
when I get that, and when they do it right, it just, it just like, it like when something comes into focus, all the flavors, it just, whoa, yeah. That's that pairing. They call it a good marriage, a sposado or something like that in Italian. And red wine with the best pairing. And you get that at an enoteca because they're all about impressing you with their wine, and it amplifies the beauty of it when it's paired with the right dish.
100%. Absolutely. So yeah, truly any pasta dish with some sort of tomato base, or frankly, even a pizza. I could see myself just,
Yeah,
bumbling through Rome with
yeah.
a freshly baked pizza with this. That sounds, and you know what? And honestly,
Oh,
Rick, I think you've inspired me a little bit to ask to just take the wine glass with me, just as I'm stumbling through Rome, like, in the town square with my slice of pizza and my glass of wine. That
yeah.
sounds perfect to me.
The restaurant, if it's a good restaurateur, if it's a greedy place designed for tourists with rotating staff, that just is getting minimum wage, they're not in a nice mood for this. But if it's a family-run restaurant, especially if you've been there a couple of times, which I really like, if you just ask them, por favore, 20 minutes, can I take this glass to the piazza? No problem. Magico. I bet magico is a word. I don't know. Indimenticabile. That'll get you. That'll get you something. But then you go over to that square and you sit there and you feel the rhythm of life. The kids are out. It's 11 p.m. and the kids are still out. And you see the flags in the dark sky and floodlit and you've got your wine. This is the critical ingredient somehow. This is the lubricant that makes all those memories sticky. And if you're just sitting in that chair the whole time, it's tougher to have those special memories. So if you can take it to the square, and that's one interesting trick because you can pay a lot of money to sit on the square and probably get worse food, or you can find that specialty place. I'm thinking of an enoteca just off of Campo di Fiore in Rome, which is not on Campo di Fiore. It's called the name of it is the corner. I forget the word in Italian, but it's on a corner about 100 yards away from the square. But my friend there, he'll let me take a glass of wine to the Campo di Fiore, and then I'm right there with Bruno, the heretic Bruno, who was burned at the stake there for
Right
giving the
there.
people power. And I'm having a glass of wine and drinking to Bruno. And boy, oh boy, that's you gotta give yourself a chance to elevate your sightseeing, and there's a lot of ways to do that. If you don't know who Bruno is and you're going to Campo di Fiore, well, you're in a deficit right there. And if you don't have a glass of nice wine, you're also at a disadvantage.
Gotta have the glass of nice wine too. I love that. Well, talking about a glass of nice wine, there was a great question that we saw in the chat. came from Vicky asking about what the legs are on a glass of wine. And this wine that we have right here actually does a good demonstration of showing us some legs on the wine. And legs on a wine typically refer to these lovely little lines that pool that typically happen, we think of them in red wines, can also happen in sugary white wines, so a little bit more sweet white wines. Why does this happen? Well, it comes down to the viscosity of the wine. So if there's more density in that wine, if there's more particle in the wine, what will happen is that it will pool in these lovely little lines that come down the side of the glass. Now, there is a misnomer that said legs are an indicator of quality. They are not. You can have a very expensive, very high quality Burgundy that is meant to be light and understated, that barely has legs and can fetch thousands of dollars for the bottle. Or you can also have, very bulk created California red blend that is dark, heavy grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Malbec that has legs and is $5 from our good friends at Trader Joe's. They used to be $2 chuck, probably now $4.50 chuck. Can have legs, but it just comes down to if the wine is more dense like a red wine, or if it has some residual sugar like some dessert wines, you will see those lines pool.
Colton, when you say viscosity, is that the same as tannin?
Somewhat similar. The tannin leads to it being a little bit more viscous and more dense.
Okay.
So to kind of lead back to the kind of conversation that we talked about with the production of rosés and reds and how those are different. So when we leave those grape skins on it, we're seeping particles from those grape skins. So that's what creates what we do call the tannins. Those are the particles that are in the wine, and then those will pool in those little legs on the side of the glass.
Do you know that almost orgasmic joy of having those little head scratcher things that go up and down with all the fingers on them?
Yes, well, I'm wondering what your angle is, Rick.
Now, when you swirl this and you look at those legs,
it looks like a head scratcher?
It looks like a head scratcher. So I looked over there, I went, where's my head scratcher when I need it, But to celebrate these legs. Now, remember, as you said, it's not the indication of a better wine unless you're looking for viscosity.
Unless you're looking for viscosity. That is fantastic. Well, we also got another great question here coming from Tanya asking, what's the difference between wines from Sicily and from other parts of Italy? Couple of different pieces here. Do you want, Rick, please go for it. Go for it.
They're cheaper because they don't have the demand. So if you're in Tuscany and you wonder why is this so expensive, it's because they don't make that much of it and everybody wants it because everybody knows the word Brunello di Montalcino. You can find a quality wine in Sicily, I think, that doesn't have that demand that drives the price up. Or maybe things are changing in Sicily now, the price is going up.
Well, things are changing. Definitely. Sicily is getting there's an increased emphasis on fine winemaking in Sicily. Prior to, I'd probably say 50 years ago or prior, there was much more of an emphasis on bulk production. And I think some of your travels have even indicated going to some of these houses that are really emphasizing fine wine production. I will say a big piece that just comes down to it is that when you have different climate, we have different grapes that we produce. So you're not going to see the same grapes that you see in Sicily. You're not going to see them in northern Italy, where you see the worlds of Sangiovese. Also, you see the world of, Brunello and Barbaresco as well. Definitely different grapes that are in there, definitely different things that are known for. But again, we have still a variety of different styles of grapes. We're starting with this, Nerello Cappuccio, which is the lighter of the red wines that we have here, probably more of an indicator similar to the heft of a Sangiovese from northern Italy. As we get to the later parts of the tasting, that Nerello Mascalese, I would say some sort of Barolo Barbaresco, that kind of presentation. That Barolo is really going to be more that heavier style that you get from northern Italy. But again, a lot of it just comes down to the different grapes that we produce. And then also you're just going to get different styles of different climates, especially considering one commonality that we do have of the two, that a lot of times when we see fine wine from northern Italy, where is it? On the foothill of the Alps. Here in southern Italy, what are we on the foothills of Mount Etna? So it is not uncommon to see on the foothills of somewhere, but that cool alpine breeze that you get definitely has a very different presentation and effect on the grapes, and really keeping its acidity higher as it's growing, as opposed to that baking sun of Sicily that's going to push out more strong, kind of bold flavors, in what you see with some of the wines we're
So
tasting today.
if you get it really simplified, if the weather is more brutally sun beating down on the vineyards, does that produce a stronger red wine, more?
It can, yes. So it all depends, sometimes depends on the grape variety that you're working with as well. But in many cases, if you've got more heat and you've got more sunlight, that triggers more growth in the grape. And what does that do when it's triggering more growth? It's converting more acid into sugar as you're going, which is also not a coincidence. Many times for warmer climates, we have wines that have a higher alcohol content. Why is that? Well, the grapes produced more sugar, and with more sugar, we produce more alcohol once we ferment the wine itself. So all of these pieces have a slight impact on it.
Wow. Colton, why is it that my favorite wines start with the letter B?
Why is it that your favorite wines start with the letter B? I'm understanding, Rick, yes, because your favorite style of wine is boxed wine. I'm remembering this
No,
correctly.
not boxed.
I
That's
had to
good.
take the opportunity.
That's really good. No, they're Corposo, I think. It just coincidentally, I think. Brunello,
Brunello.
Barolo,
Mhm.
Barbaresco.
Mhm.
Um, there's just for some reason
And potentially, and I have a funny feeling Bordeaux also fits within your
yeah,
family
Bordeaux,
of
it's the
red
same
wines.
thing. Bordeaux.
So conveniently heavy dark reds that start with the letter B. And I'm trying to think of, like, is there something from Portugal and Spain that
Barbaresco. These are just, I mean, a lot of these are from Piedmont, I think. Barolo is
Mhm.
from up there in Piedmont, right? But that gets into that whole corposo. It's fun. I enjoy saying it,
Mhm.
molto corposo, per favore. And
Yeah.
it's a heavy wine, isn't it? It's not a better
Mhm.
wine, but it's a heavy wine. And if you're eating meat, if you're eating red meat, you probably want to have corposo vino rosso, don't you?
Absolutely, 100%. And I think for a clarification for those that are tasting right now, this is definitely lighter than those wines that we're talking about. So this is definitely on the lighter
That's
presentation
true. So
of what we've got.
we'll wait for our corposo wines. I'm sure that's
Well,
going
you know what? Well,
to
why don't we just start transitioning that direction, Steve? I don't think that's a horrible idea.
That's what I was kind of shooting for that. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
let's slowly, meander our way into some of our heavier red wines as well. And that next one we're going to do is our Balance of Powers Rosso d'Italia. Rosso d'Italia will be the next one.
balance of powers.
We'll work
Yes.
with here. Little some subtle undertones of, see, that's what we love, especially here at In Good Taste. We have a lot of fun with these logos as well. Part of the balance of powers, we like to think that in our balance of powers wines, that we have a good balance of different flavors. If it's oaked, a little balance of oak and the flavor of the juice itself, balance of different wines as well. So that's really the idea behind our Balance of Powers logo, which is not a coincidence that you have both the rosé and this red wine under that
So is
logo as
balance
well.
of powers an indication that it's a blend?
So at least in this specific case, yes. So this is a blended wine from this one, especially since we don't have a specific grape listed on the label
Oh,
in this case. So one thing I am noticing from one question that we received in the chat is that I neglected to talk about how do we critique wine as we're going through the full, what we call 5 S's to wine tasting. Do a
yes.
quick highlight. Probably would have been good, Rick, for when we do this again in the future, to make sure that I actually cover this for the audience as well. So this one, so our 5 S's to wine tasting, they are C, swirl, smell, sip, and the last one is savor. So first one, you're tilting your glass 45-degree angle. Look at the wine from the top of the glass, looking at the color and the depth of said color. So especially for these red wines, you'll want to do a comparison of how much light is passing through them. You'll see as compared to that prior wine had quite a bit of light passing through it, but this red wine you're starting to see is quite a bit darker, which is an indicator of the fact that we've got more density in the wine. Typically when we have more density, you have depth of flavor, depth of mouthfeel in there as well. So definitely got that going on with it. Just from looking at the wine, you get a little sense of what we're getting into. That good swirl, as we talked about earlier, really opens it up, gets some extra air right as you go into smell, getting your nose deep into the wine. In some essence, we're trying to get a sense of what we're going to be tasting, but there are definitely elements and times where you'll smell some aroma notes that don't quite show up in the flavor, or the balance of what you are smelling doesn't quite show up in the same order of when you end up getting to the flavor as well. Fourth S, sip. That one seems pretty obvious, but of course you can aerate before you sip it. And then after you're done with that sip, it's savor. And that's just being really critical. What's in the wine itself? Is it watery in its consistency? Does it have density? Is it almost creamy in its texture? Is there a quick hint of flavor? Does it hit me quickly and disappear? Or does it hit me, it lingers, and it changes and it manipulates, and there's more depth of flavor? The reason I really am emphasizing that depth of flavor and that building and changing presentation is that this wine right here, absolutely, because it is a blend of different grapes, is really going to have that complexity that kind of builds and changes into the aftertaste as you go through it as
So if
well.
you like I mean, I don't know many, I don't have the vocabulary for many different sensations of appreciating wine, but complexity is one that I get. And complexity comes with a blend. Is that what you're getting at?
It can come some grape varieties. For example, Cabernet Sauvignon is known for having a complexity and multidimensionality on the grape of its own. But in the vast majority of cases, when you're getting this level of complexity of a variety of different
Yeah.
flavors coming from a bunch of different angles, typically you're dealing with something that is a blend of different grapes, bringing the best of those different grapes together.
Now, a long time ago in my travel career and tour guiding career, there was a phenomenon in Italy called Super Tuscan.
Super Tuscan.
And everybody was going for Super Tuscan. And my understanding was they just broke some of the traditions where they kept it pure, and they decided, let's bring in a varietal from another country and mix it up with it and be free, modern, you know. And you have these Super Tuscans. And they were complex and they were full-bodied. And they were
Yes.
really popular. And they competed with, you know, the king of the red beers, Brunello di Montalcino, among
Mhm.
tourists.
Yeah, and that's what those super Tuscans, and it's interesting because super can kind of have such a different connotation of like superb and oh, that's super. But in this case, super Tuscan as being super as above and beyond. So above and beyond the grapes that would typically be grown in that specific location. So yes.
So
So this would
beyond the conventions of,
Yes, beyond the Italian conventions, bringing in a lot of French varietals like Cabernet
yeah.
Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah as well, and blending those together in a very non-traditional fashion, and showing that like we can actually compete with these international varietals, and do a fabulous job with it as well. So
Huh.
yes, definitely some good stuff with the Super
I
Tuscans.
like this wine. This is my favorite so far. It's really good.
Rick, you are, I will say, especially on our tastings, you are easy to read because once we get into those heavier reds, you are definitely excited about them. Now, there is always that possibility. There's always that possibility that you're thoroughly enjoying the last few wines. That's because you have the sips in your system of the prior wines.
Oh,
But
because
I
I've
do
tried
think
it
it
the
has.
other way. I've tried it the other way just to double check me.
And he can confirm, I still love my red wines.
I love my red wines. It's yeah. But and you mentioned something about the mouth feel, or what was that?
Yes, the
What is,
mouthfeel, and that's just comes like what's the density? So let's take another sip of this wine really quickly. You can speak directly to its mouthfeel.
because I realize that mouth people, some people, it's like a sweater on your tongue or something. They don't
Mhm.
like it, but I think it goes with. Maybe I'm just trained like a dog, you know, that, yeah, when you've got that mouthfeel, you got some red Chianina beef, or you got some good wild boar, and you're
Mhm.
enjoying a nice Corpozo. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's a
Well,
beautiful
and
wine.
that's I think you're speaking perfectly to some really great pairings that are here. Something that is fatty and meaty
There
in
you go.
this, especially like, we were talking, I said an eggplant parmesan with the prior. This one's more like a classic meat lasagna. This
Yeah.
is more just like the
Oh,
really the fatty meats, especially something that's got kind of like a juicy character to the wine like this and has so much flavor. Something that's juicy, fatty in the food is going to go well with it. And I think you have a little bit more density to it. So matching it with a food, like you're saying, that has more heft, more density to
yeah.
it, really affords itself beautifully.
You know, that's interesting because I think I like Orvieto more than I should. And it's a little town 2 hours north of, or an hour north of Rome, south of, between Rome and Florence. And maybe it's because the food there is based on wild game.
Mhm.
I mean, the ravioli will be wild game filling it, and that just makes the full-bodied red wine even better.
100%. And
And
especially if you get a wine, especially take a lot of Sangiovese. If you feel like you've never had Sangiovese, you've had Chianti before. Sangiovese is one of the staple grapes in Chianti. Anytime you have something that's a little bit wild in the flavor of the food, get something that's a little pungent on the
yeah,
flavor of the
yeah,
wine.
yeah.
Perfect pairing. At
So
least on.
Sangiovese, there's not many. If you know how there's people can go like to a lie detector or something like that. They wire them up and then they can tell when they're all getting weirded out or turned on or whatever. Um, you could wire me up with one of these machines and you could say all the grapes in Europe. And then when you said Sangiovese, I would go like that.
So
And
what
Sangiovese, that's the grape, isn't it, for all these Tuscan rich, full-bodied wines?
behind many of them, especially like what the staple grape in Chianti as well. And
Yeah.
Sangiovese also has a very fun name behind it. Sangiovese originates from a term, the blood of Jupiter. And the reason why we get this name, Sangiovese, like sanguine, of that of blood. And it's because Sangiovese can get like a rust color, like rust, like kind of the color of blood with it as well. So it really affords it to that kind of heft, that pungency, that strength to it as well. But yeah, I did get a really great question that came in the chat. Well, first and foremost, tell people not to be intimidated, drink what you like. Absolutely. I will just quickly want to say yes, 100% to that statement. Absolutely drink what you enjoy. And that's why you join us for tastings like this one, so you can ferret out exactly what it is you enjoy. So you
Yeah.
can grab at that next thing in your local wine shop as well. We also got the question of which grapes are in this blend. Great question. So we have a blend of different wines, all of which we typically find in Sicily, some that come a little bit further north into the southern part of Sicily. So you do have in here, the main grape is Nero d'Avola is the one. So this is the staple. This is the most commonly planted red grape in Sicily. You've got Primitivo, which most people have never heard of before. Typically, we find this in Puglia. But interestingly enough, Primitivo is known by a different name here in the United States. That name is Zinfandel. So if you've had California Zinfandel, that is the same grape as Primitivo. Why is it? It's an interesting one. This is one of the weird ones. It's a traditionally Croatian grape, whereas Croatia right across from Italy in the Adriatic Sea and where we get Primitivo. And then the last grape in the blend is Nerello Mascalese, which is the last grape that we'll be tasting today. Definitely the heaviest of the three grapes that are in there. So three quintessential Southern Italian grapes that have been blended together with this one. Rick, I've got a great question coming from Kelly. It says, Rick, have you ever served a wine while visiting a place and absolutely hated it? And if so, how do you handle it in a culturally sensitive way? How do you go about this, Rick?
That's a good question. I've never really hated a wine. I've just found a wine is uninspired and it's just forgettable. And I just figure like, well, I screwed up. It was my fault for ordering it. One thing I really like to do is if there's bottles open, I limit my selection to the bottles that are open. And I just have a fun thing with my travel partners. We always ask for 3 samples of 3 different wines that we might like, and then do a kind of a blind. We do it, we all sample them, and then we do, when you have 4 people at a table, you got 3 different wines. There's number one, number two, number three. You don't want to, people are so polite, they go, oh yeah, I like that one, that's fine. But they won't say what they really want because that's kind of aggressive. What you do is you just go 1, 2, 3, and everybody puts the number of the wine that they liked. And then you have to just be self-serving. And then you see which wine people really liked, and then you order that bottle. And that cuts your risk way down. And if you limit your selection to bottles that are already open, I've never been to a restaurant that wouldn't get a kick out of letting these Americans play that little game.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that's the key to it, is saying, hey, what bottles do you already have open? Could I try a little bit of something to see what I like? And then another portion that I really love of what you said, Rick, comes down to the world of wine etiquette very beautifully. And that is, you said, well, if I ordered it, that was my mistake. This is a great moment to say, when you order a bottle of wine on a wine list, and they present that bottle to you, they uncork it and they present it to you. When you are smelling and tasting it, that is actually not an opportunity for you to say, oh, I don't actually like this style of wine. What you are doing in that moment, you are just giving it a good smell. First off, you don't even need to taste the wine. All you need to do is smell it. And you're smelling to see if the wine is corked. Corked wines smell like a wet paper bag, and it's pungent from like a solid 6 inches away from your face.
So if
And
the
that's all
cork has
it's
gone bad, if the cork has gone bad, it'll be apparent to you, even if you're not a sommelier.
absolutely. It will smell so pungent, and it will smell like something is completely wrong. Just a wet, soggy paper bag. You will be able to smell it from.
You could probably offer the glass to the server, and he or she would
And
go,
they'll be able to see the same. They'll be like, oh yeah, that's absolutely that's bad. Let's get you a second bottle, or let's get you another wine. Speaking of corks, what is this fabulous demonstration you have here,
this
Rick?
is, I don't do many souvenirs these days, but one of my favorite things we do with our groups in Portugal. Portugal is so popular these days for so many reasons. And we go to a cork farm, and these people, our groups have been going there for years. So they've actually built this open air wagon that they take us through the cork fields, and they peel the bark. This is bark of cork tree. And they just harvest the bark off of this cork tree. And then with their machine, boom, they cut the corks out of this bark from the cork tree. And I just, for me to be able to have seen this, it just it gives an extra dimension to the joy of a good cork, that experience of corking and hearing that music. But that's my favorite souvenir from a couple of years ago. And I've got a new grandchild, and you can have a lot of fancy plastic toys, but if you ever have a hunk of cork tree with the corks like this, it's endless entertainment.
I love that. See, I love that the idea that there are little kids growing up in wine country in Portugal, that is their toy, is pushing corks through a piece of
This is the
peeled off cork.
greatest. You know, it's so funny when you travel. It's such a silly thing because this is kind of like garbage for them. It's just an extra piece of wood. But this is a treasure for me because I just love the whole wine culture and the families and the heritage and all that's associated with it.
Which I'm glad you were able to show that. I think a lot of people end up being quite surprised to hear that the production of corks is relatively sustainable in a lot of ways, because you're not actually cutting down a tree. You are simply, that cork that you're talking about that's in the bottle is peeled off bark of the tree, which is quite cool.
Yeah, the trees love it. I mean, just imagine if they're peeling off your skin and then 6 months later they come off and peel it again as it heals.
That sounds significantly less appetizing, Rick, when you phrase it that
we're
way.
at the top of the food chain, so we can.
So we're not peeling off anybody's skin anytime soon. Well, it's funny. There's a great question that's here in the chat, Rick. Having talked about, little kids' toys, we do have a question. Lauren and Julie and many others have asked the question, what is your recommended European travel destination with small kids?
Oh, well, if they're really small, my favorite place to go is to Grandma and Grandpa's on the way to the airport and drop them off. Now, because it's just to take little tiny kids to Europe, if you really want to accomplish some serious sightseeing and if you don't have endless money, it's expensive and you just don't get as much done. I would rather have half the time in Europe. I'd rather have 8 days in Europe instead of 16 without the kids, and then come home and do something with the kids. But when the kids get older, it's great. We brought our kids to Europe every year for their first 20 years. And I treasure that opportunity to be in the parenting and raising the kids and all those memories. It's a beautiful thing to do if you can manage it. But the little tiny kids, it's not a lot of great value. But when they get older, it's wonderful because my kids have this wonderful adventurous spirit about food and about all sorts of slices of culture. And you're the palette that you're going to end up painting your life story with has more colors on it if you've traveled. And that's good parenting.
Well, we got an interesting question on the cork discussion of whether or not it makes a difference if a bottle has a cork or a screw top to it. This is a hotly debated subject in a number of ways. Couple of things I'll say here. One, if you're going to age fine wine for a long period of time, you're going to want to have a traditional cork in it. Why is cork so perfect? Because it lets just the right amount of air in. Let's just a
Ah,
very subtle amount that allows the wine to change its texture very, very subtly. This is
ah.
the same reason why we many times will leave wines in an oak barrel. It lets just the finest amount of air to let it process in a beautiful way without the wine spoiling. So if you're going for long-term aging, we are going to want a permanent real cork in there so it provides just the right amount of barrier between the wine and the outside.
Hmm.
Now, in the case of if you're just dealing with mass produced wine and you're dealing with something that you want to just enjoy, you're not planning to age it in any way, shape, or form, interestingly enough, the screw cap is actually better. The screw cap typically, in most ways, is one, more consistent, two, does not have the opportunity of being tainted or corked, like we were talking prior, and is actually better for short-term production and short-term use wines. So an interesting one kind of on that one. But yeah, if you're going to be going for fancy, setting it in your cellar for multiple years, you're going to want that traditional cork in there.
That's a little bit related to the Coravin, isn't it? And how they've got these dispensers now. I imagine they're everywhere, but my beat is Europe, so I see them in Europe where you didn't have it before, but now you've got these fancy bottles that are opened, and they've got this Coravin, which is a way to stick a needle through the cork and pull out the fine wine without uncorking it. Because when they pull that needle out, it's as if it's never been opened, I understand.
Right.
Because once you open a cork, you've only got so many days before you got to finish that. But if you do the Coravin, you can treat it like a unopened bottle, and that gives the traveler access to sampling a glass of really expensive wine without opening a big expensive bottle of wine. And more variety of wine is available to be tasted. So when you go to wine country, I've seen it all over Tuscany. You'll find the wine tasting places in the towns have these 20 bottles all open with their Coravin, and you can get a little bit of each, and it's quite nice from a tasting point of view.
Yeah, whoever came up with that concept of let's pass a tiny needle through the cork that allows itself to close back up so that you can get the wine. One thing that's also very cool about a Coravin is also the standpoint, if you've ever utilized them before, you also have a canister of argon gas that you put in it. So as it pulls wine out, you're not putting air into it that will spoil the wine. It puts argon into the wine in its place, which doesn't interact with the wine, which is kind of crazy that we're at that level of depth, but it's absolutely fascinating. Like you said, if you've got $1,000 bottle of wine and you only want to enjoy a glass of it every 5 years, boom, there you go. Coravin is your friend.
I was talking about Coravin on my Facebook page back a few years ago when I encountered my first Coravin at a wine bar in the Italian Riviera. And just because I mentioned it online, the people who make this Coravin in somewhere in New England sent me a free Coravin. And I thought, well, this is cool. A Coravin, 'cause it's quite expensive to get these things. And it had that gas canister with it. And when I had realized I got to somehow pump gas in there to do it, I just said, this is beyond me. So I gave my Coravin to a friend of mine who really appreciates the wine. But I just said, that's just too complicated. I'll just finish that bottle.
I love that. You're just like, if I'm already going to open it, I'll just enjoy the rest of the
That's
bottle. Thank
that's
you
my
very much.
solution if you don't have the temperament to be a chemist with your Coravin.
That's fantastic. I love that. Well, Rick, we always get a little bit of this question for you in some way, shape, and form, and answer this to whatever level of depth you care to use. But how does Rick feel about wine and weed pairings?
Wine and weed. I don't put them together that much. I mean, if I'm smoking pot, you want something to wet your whistle, but I don't need. I've never even thought about the beautiful buzz you get from wine and the marijuana. It would be like mixing two things that I don't want to mix.
Mm.
Um,
Those are
so
separate experiences.
they're to me they're separate experiences. Yeah. Um, but I wouldn't go to the mat on that. I may not be right on that. I mean, you may, if you wanted to get in, you wanted to do this. This is available actually recorded. We're recording, right? So people can listen to this again. So you'll get an email, I think, a follow-up, and I think you're going to get a link to this if you want to look at it again, or some people who paid for this and couldn't see it, so they can look at it that way. Go ahead if you're smoking pot in one of the 24 states where it is legal for your adults in the privacy of your own home for the time being until somebody up above decides to roll it back. I think you could give this whole interview another 2 hours of fun, and you've probably got a little wine left, and see if it's true, if marijuana would add to it in a constructive way, or if it would just derail the whole enlightening,
Whole
inspirational
experience, and you're
experience
just
of
like, I'm
meaningful.
drinking wine, I have no idea what I'm drinking. But palate is shot. I love that.
Right.
Fantastic. Well, one quick question I'd like to answer that came from the chat of, can you talk about the difference of the Italian wine labels when you see IGT, DOC, and DOCG? So these are all classifications in wine. IGT, which is a confusing one since I work for a company called In Good Taste with the same initials, does not stand for that. IGT is, if I'm remembering it correctly, Indicazione Grafica Tipica. That is the entry level that's the first certification that you can have in wine. It's an indication of geography and place. So typically that just means it's an Italian wine from a specific place. There aren't any more regulations. The moment that you get into DOC and DOCG, denominazione or oh goodness, this is horrible. I'm going to find out. I'm going to remember what my brain of DOC is in Italy. But DOC and then DOCG, denomination of origin, and then denomination of origin, DOCG. I'm forgetting what the G stands for, but they are just simply indications of rules that are in place that keep a level of control in a specific area. So you'll see certain areas where it'll be a DOC or a DOCG. That is just simply, there is a governing body in that area that is validating the quality of wines from that specific region. So if they're going to use that region's label on it, it has to have certain quality standards, certain growing standards, et cetera, in its production.
I think the C stands for control in Italian.
Yes, denominazione di origine controllata. Yes, controlled.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes.
I remember the first category, whatever you called it, IGT, table wine, basically.
Yes.
I was at a wine filling station outside of Orvieto, north of Rome, and my friend took me there, and it was like literally the same machines that you use to pump gas, you know, the big handle thing where you pull the trigger and the gas comes out. And it was hooked up to white wine and red wine, and it's IGT. It's just that table wine. But these people these salt to the earth people would come to this filling station 2 or 3 times a year with a car full of big, kind of looks
Big
like
jugs.
somebody who makes moonshine, you know, jugs. And they got these jugs, and then they fill each of them up and they cork it, and it was cheaper than any other liquid you could buy in that community, the table wine. And my friends told me, hey, we don't have a lunch or a dinner without wine, and this table wine works just fine for us. And this is part of their whole culture. And the wine is consistent. It's nothing to export, but it works well for them. And you get that when you go to a simple restaurant and just order a glass of simple wine.
I love that. Just that's the wine you cook with, the wine you sip on while you're cooking. I love that. With that, that's fantastic.
But it's not the wine you take with you from the restaurant to enjoy the floodlit facade of the Gothic cathedral.
Right, exactly. That will pull out of a bottle. Well, as you're sipping on that last little bit, I'm noticing, you know what, Rick, you and I can get very easily carried away in talking stories and talking wine. So I don't think we've actually spoken about this wine yet, about what it smells and tastes like. So
yep.
This one, especially as compared to that Nerello Cappuccio that you had at the beginning, this is going to be a much richer, more robust presentation with this one, where the prior wine was kind of these tart berry fruits. It definitely had those berry fruits in it. This is darker. It's very much heavier in its presentation. So darker fruits, blackberry, raspberry, maybe even hinting at a plum sensation. But because we're dealing with a blend of different grapes that we've got here, it's really just got a complexity. It's just a lot. It's like a bowl of fruits. It's not a specific fruit. It's just a bowl of dark fruits. Very satisfying. Great for any sort of like meatier or heavier foods, especially, again, that classic meat lasagna. Anything that has ground meat in it, it's going to go really fabulously with just the depth of flavor that you find with this. Very full bodied, but still quite smooth. The tannin isn't giving that, like Rick, that you mentioned, that sweater in your mouth kind of feeling. It still really has an elegant smoothness, which we can give to a little bit of, chalk up to a little bit of that oak aging that we find in this wine as well.
And this is Sicilian also.
Yes, well, part of it, so the reason why it does not specifically say Sicily is that some of the grapes are Sicily, some come from a little bit more in mainland Italy.
But in the south of Italy.
In the south of Italy, yes.
Yeah, that's nice. I like it.
So yeah. Well, that leads us with the little more than 10 minutes that we have left. We have got ourselves some time to taste one final wine, Rick. So let's go on ahead and do that. And that's going to be by process of elimination, depending on how much of these wines that you've been sipping on this evening, you'll be able to easily find this one. And then this one is our good friend, the Nerello Mascalese. Nerello Mascalese is the last one. And this is our Fortune Favors label as well with this one. And what I love about our Fortune Favors label, it looks a bit like a tarot card, which is kind of fun. And the reason why we utilize this label is because Fortune favors the bold. Fortune favors the bold. And this is going to be the bolder of the wines that we taste this evening. So definitely getting into something very exciting. You'll just see just straight out of the gate, just from the color of the wine, and you can even get it from the presentation and just off of the aroma of this wine as well. So you'll notice this wine also starts, the first word in it is Nerello, Nerello, which is also, again, sourcing back to the darkness of the grape. And there's a reason why Nerello Cappuccio and Nerello Mascalese have similar names, because they are sister grapes of different genetic origin, but for thousands of years, they have been blended together, very frequently blended together, and a lot of Sicilian table wines and even some of the higher level wines as well. Sicilian blends that you will see will be a marriage of these two grapes. Why do we marry them together? Which is interesting. I use marriage, but then also called them sisters. So we'll just mix metaphor here. Just stay with me on the idea that we've got here. But the reason why we blend them together is because they bring something different. Nerello Cappuccio is lighter, known for lighter fruits, lighter body and presentation, a little bit more tart and savory on its side. Nerello Mascalese, as you can see on this side, is definitely known for being richer, darker, more tannic. So you bring those two things together, and it's a real marriage of both of those presentations, finding you something that's not too light, not too heavy, but kind of in the middle of the two. So this is showing you the Nerello Mascalese grape on its own, pure presentation. And just there's a lot of elegance to this wine that you're able to taste here, that's for sure.
How's the bouquet? By the way, when you do sample the bouquet, you should really go deep in there with your nose, right? I mean, you have to be
Absolutely.
polite. A lot of people kind of go, "Oh yeah,
No,
yeah,"
no, deep
but
in
stick
there.
it, but you stick that nose way in there as far as it can go. Some of us can go farther than others, but do your best. What do you get, Colton, when you do this?
This one, it's interesting. We're kind of on this interesting pendulum swing with the prior wines. See, the first was very kind of like savory tart fruits. The other, that, Italian red blend that we had was definitely more kind of like rich fruits. This still has a rich aroma, but it hints a little bit more back over towards the savory side. Not as savory as that first one,
Okay.
but
'Cause I don't get much in the way. I get plenty of flavor, but I don't get much bouquet. Is that?
yeah, it's very kind of it's a light hint of floral, I think is what it is. It's got a little bit, there's this kind of like red flower almost sensation to it, kind of hints a little bit of those berry fruits, but I would absolutely agree with you where it feels more the aroma would kind of hint at, oh, it's kind of plain, but then you get to the flavor and it's wow, there's so much that's
Yeah,
behind it
because the
once you
flavor's
taste it.
there. And we also, Colton, we get a little bit of this, don't we?
We get the head scratcher, the
Yeah.
legs.
I mean, check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see just the density of the wine by sloshing it back and forth a little bit. They're
Yeah.
just those lines, those legs that you're seeing are definitely thicker and denser
Yeah.
this one as well.
Meaning
But yeah,
it's got more tannin, more mouthiness.
yes, absolutely. Definitely a lot more to it. And I think especially when we're at this point, we're talking for pairings, darker cheeses, heavier cheeses.
Yeah.
This is like a strong, pungent cheddar
Oh,
on the
Gorgonzola maybe.
absolutely. Gorgonzola is a great example for this one. And then any sort of like full cut, full cut meat of some sort, this is going to do a fabulous job of cutting right into it. And I will tell you, even though it is 10 p.m. here on Eastern Standard Time where I am based, it's making me very hungry, even though I've had dinner.
I was just doing this because I just was drinking this beautiful red wine and saying, the physical actually saying Gorgonzola. I want to
Made
be
you hungry.
I want to be in Italy doing that, you know. I want to be in a little enoteca, friends with the guy who runs it. He's so excited. I enjoy the wine. The wine he's all about. And I just go, bicchieri di I mean, a little bit of Gorgonzola, por favore, and he'll bring some other stuff. It's just, it becomes you volley back and forth. You sip this
Absolutely.
wine, you try that cheese, you sip this wine, you have a slice of that salami, you try a little bit of pasta. It's a beautiful, it's it's kind of the essence of going out in the evening in Italy in a lot of ways. If you let yourself have that adventure of holding hands with the wine as you wade through the cuisine.
Absolutely. 100%. 100%. And yeah, just being able to order some fine Italian wine with some good Italian cheese does sound delicious in
Here's
itself.
something very unromantic, but when I drink red wine, my teeth get different color.
Hmm.
And it doesn't happen when I drink white wine. Some people don't have porous teeth that absorbs it, apparently. What
Interesting.
your teeth are just white as can be, and mine are.
It's if I got really close up, you'd see there's some stain in there, Rick. Don't give me
Yeah,
too much credit.
because you can, because that's when I just love red wine, and by the end of the evening, I've got purple teeth.
You've got purple teeth, but
It's a
that's it.
small price to pay.
Small price to pay. If I've got purple teeth, at least people will know that I was enjoying my evening.
Yeah, that's good. That's the mark of a carpe diem.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
uh,
100%.
wow, this is such a celebration of drinkable culture. It's just a beautiful. It's a
100%.
reminder. It's much more than just you know fermented grape juice. This is a slice of life, and I love the way Italians and Europeans embrace life. That's one of the beautiful things about travel. It could be in the food, in the music, in the conviviality, and being out and about, in the gelato, and in so much. And this is just one more example of how life is good, and how when we get out there and travel, we can take home a little bit of that joie de vivre, and we can make this world a better place.
And you can even take it a step further, take some more joie de vivre from that location by buying a local bottle of wine and bring it in your check luggage back home.
It's so dangerous. I drink it the night before at the hotel.
It never makes it on the plane.
Never does, never does. You could, but I do take the photograph of the label, and I can bring it to my wine importer here. And if it's possible to get, you can have it that way, and that's a nice souvenir.
Well, and that's the other great thing that I always like to say is that very frequently I get the question on my tastings of like, what's your favorite bottle of wine? What's your go-to? And the interesting thing is I really don't go back to the same wine again and again. There's just so many thousands of
Yeah,
options. You can find
yeah.
something from a similar region, and
Oh,
maybe that region speaks to what you like as well. But don't ever be disappointed that you can't find that one wine ever again. There's stuff that's so similar or brings a different character to it. Always something to explore in the world of wine.
mm.
That is for sure.
Those are my favorite souvenirs. Just a passion for Sagrantino when you're in Umbria, and Barolo when you're in the north of Italy, and the less famous grapes in areas that aren't so commercial. They can be just as good, but they just don't have the fame.
100%. Absolutely. And especially when, I mean, look, especially when you get some of these smaller vintners in many countries, especially, I mean, I think of my experience in Portugal of just walking through, and you're like, these small local vintners aren't attached to some
Yeah.
enormous conglomerate that's sending their wines all over the world. But then at the same point, you get to discover, like, well, I never would have discovered this had I not walked down this dirt road and asked to see this person's vineyard. There's something very special
You
there.
know,
So
I've always been like a backpacker, slumming my way around Europe. That's my heritage. But a woman in a bed and breakfast that I used to list in my book in England, I was telling, can't you give a cheaper price for the people with my guidebook? And she said, pay peanuts, get monkeys. And and that was so wise. And when it comes to appreciating culture, pay peanuts, get monkeys. I mean, one thing I try to do with my tour groups is less food, but more expensive and higher quality. Some really expensive foie gras, and share it. Four people can share one portion of really fine foie gras. And you go to Portugal, and I'm really into the barnacles, the percebes, and they're very expensive. When I'm in Spain, I'm really into not just jamon, because that'll be jamon serrano, mediocre ham. Life is too short for mediocre ham when you're in Spain. Jamon iberico, it costs triple. But when you're traveling, find a way to enjoy the top quality stuff because Europe is all about the quality of ingredients. We're all about good looking food and efficiencies, but Europe is about the quality of the ingredients. And when it comes to wine, wonder why does that wine cost twice as much? There's a reason. I mean, it
Mhm.
sells not just to stupid tourists, it sells to savvy locals. They have less money than us and they pay double for the wine, and it would make sense to give it a whirl.
100%, absolutely. And I love that, because when you said that pay peanuts get monkeys, it also sounds like one of my favorite adages of not my monkeys, not my circus, kind of number as well. So that's a great one, in a world of mixed metaphors on
Well,
these
when,
things.
when when we have an opportunity to travel, we want to do it right. And
Absolutely.
and Colton, your expertise on wine is just inspirational. I'm always a little bit jealous and envious of people that can appreciate all the fine differences in whatever. My dad imported fine pianos from Germany. I could play two different pianos and close my eyes and know what make they are.
It's
But I
amazing.
certainly couldn't do that with wine. But we can strive to appreciate the little fine points of culture in a world that is sometimes the incentive is to dumb us down. And
Absolutely.
we can not only enjoy more ourselves, but we can help create a world or fund a world that has those fine points going forward. So that's a good, if we need a rationale, that's a good, good rationale for going,
One
enjoying the quality.
100%. I mean, hey, this is wine. Wine has been a passion of mine. I feel like I haven't even, scratched the surface of everything there is to know in the world of wine. But that being said, definitely absolutely a passion of mine, in a lot of ways. And Rick, it is always nothing short of a pleasure getting to share that passion with you, over these tastings. These are always so much fun. And I just do want to say another cheers and thank you, to all of you who have joined us this evening. Again, the ticket price that you've paid to be here is supporting your local public media stations. So a huge thank you to all of you, for that. It has been such an amazing evening. We've had such a fantastic time, and I'm so glad that all of you could join us for what is always such a treat for me, getting to sit here and chat with Rick about wine and traveling the world. So,
Oh,
Rick, any final thoughts from your end before we close ourselves out this evening?
well, I think in the world of broadcast media, public broadcasting is the fine wine of that part of our world. Media is more important than ever. Think of how it influences people's opinions, and it opens us up to the ability to celebrate the beautiful diversity and variety on this planet. And you can learn a lot about your own home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. And by what we've done tonight, we've raised a lot of money for a lot of great stations that are committed to bringing us quality media that helps us be good citizens of both this country and of our beautiful planet. So let's drink to that. And Colton, I love drinking wine with you. You are great.
You went right back at you, Rick. It is always a pleasure. So cheers to you, cheers to everyone else, and have a lovely rest of your evening, everyone. Thanks so much.